Alright, hello! So, I just wanted to take a video and kind of go over all of the Rathuum mods that just got added to the game. Because some of them are pretty interesting and some of them are completely useless and worth ignoring. So, let's just get this started. And I'm going to be going in alphabetical order, so if you already know the names of the mods, that's a pretty good way to know what I'm about to go over, I guess. So first we have acid shells. So this, right off the bat, is probably the best mod to come out of the Rathuum. This makes it so that whenever you kill any enemy, they explode, much like Nova's antimatter drop will make enemies explode when they die, and it will deal 450 plus 45% of the enemy's max health in corrosive damage in a 15-meter radius. So this mod is absolutely fantastic, not functioning more, like right now, but when it is functioning correctly, and there are some enemies where it does function correctly, it's very inconsistent, the weird bug that's going on with this thing right now. It is probably one of the best mods in the game, and just in terms of damage output, puts out more damage than I think any mod in the game, potentially. The nice thing about this is that it can chain from enemy to enemy, so if you, say, if you shoot the Sobek down a hallway and you kill 3 guys, and there are another 3 guys on the other side of the hallway, and they're all the same enemy, and then they'll have, like, let's say they're just health. You will kill everyone in the hallway because you do 150%, basically, of the, like, total health there. It's actually only 135%, but it's over 100% of their health pool, and in a 15-meter radius, it ends up being a lot of damage. Enemies that are of significantly high level, especially the infested, their health scales up really high, and it doesn't take that much time for acid shells to be able to kick out more damage than just like any kind of other shotgun mod, which is really cool. And just in general, the mod is really interesting. It's worth noting that the best thing about this mod is that it is corrosive damage, because corrosive damage doesn't have any negative modifiers Yeah, I think corrosive is only positive if I'm not mistaken. If I'm mistaken, it'll be on screen. But basically, the way that it goes is if you are all running corrosive projections and you're using acid shells and you're using, let's say, Nova, if you have all of roughly the same enemy or one strong enemy and many weaker enemies, what would basically happen is, say there's a heavy gunner with no armor standing in the middle of a bunch of butchers with no armor. You shoot the heavy gunner, and they die. Let's say they have 20,000 health. Chances are pretty good that the enemies around them don't have 20,000 health, first of all. And second of all, if you're Nova procking these enemies, they're going to take 90% of that heavy gunner's maximum health value, plus the 450, so it's just going to kill everyone around them. And then, when that explosion kills those enemies around them, all of them will explode with acid shells as well. Basically, for super, far end game where you're definitely running all corrosive projection, this mod is absolutely incredible and scales harder than I think any other mod, which is really cool. Probably the single best mod to come out of Rathuum by a pretty significant margin. On the complete other hand, electromagnetic shielding. This mod is absolutely terrible. Not only because it's on the Ak and Brunt, which are not that good, but because this is just useless regardless. Even when this is maxed out with its large range, it's just not good. There's not really anything redeeming here. Blocking is not very good in the game in general. And taking damage other people would be taking is not really useful. Basically, if you would use this, you should instead do literally anything else that's crowd control related. It's a mod that exists, and it's interesting, but it's not useful in any way, shape, or form, which is unfortunate. Fomorian Accelerant, on the other hand, this is actually an interesting mod for the Dragoon. It is not bringing the Dragoon up anywhere, in my opinion, and it's interesting. It's more of a fun mod, I'd say. I sold my one that I maxed and tested of this thing for something like 40 plat, which was super worth it. But it's just, it doesn't do enough, honestly. It traveling faster is really nice, and the Dragoon is already alright, so this mod just makes the Dragoon more fun to use, but it's not really adding a whole lot to the weapon, and for me personally, I would rather just use a Sancti Tigress if I really need that much damage, and just having the charge up on the Dragoon is always kind of a bummer anyway. Now we've got Harkonar scope. So much like body count, this is kind of a band-aid for sniper rifles. The only problem being that instead of it being a band-aid for sniper rifles that suddenly makes things like really crazy and viable, it's just a band-aid mod that's not really going to make snipers any better, I think. It was kind of baffling to me that, like acid shells, snipers didn't get mods that are akin to that, because that would actually help snipers out a whole lot. If you gave a sniper rifle, like let's say enemies explode in like a 15-meter radius and it does 90% of that enemy's health, to compensate for snipers having like basically no AoE and often not any punch through whatsoever, that would make that would make the mod for snipers very good and give snipers like, oh hey, well this is a boost, this is a reason to use sniper rifles. Unfortunately, the combo counter was already bad, much like the melee combo counter. So now we have Harkonar scope to try and band-aid that, and I don't think it's going to work. I don't think this makes snipers any more appealing, and it's just kind of a bummer in general that there is even a timer on sniper combos as opposed to just having it be not missing. So it's a mod that may become more reasonable in the future, but for now is not a big enough band-aid for a large problem for sniper rifles since they're reworked. Then we have Hunter's Bonesaw. So the big problem with this is that it is far too situational. Because when you're attacking a prone enemy, that means an enemy that has been knocked down. And what this mod is for having an enemy be on the ground and you to do a ground finisher to them. That's what this is trying to achieve. The big problem with that is that doesn't happen often enough, and you have to already have the enemy knocked down, so doing whatever you want to them is fine. It's too situational for something that you could instead have a mod that is more impactful. And with melee weapons already being very full of mods that you definitely want to put in there, like body count, pressure point, like spoiled strike a lot of the time, all these mods, like just a raw elemental for more damage, Hunter's Bonesaw doesn't really have any value because it's just too situational. Alright, medi-ray. This one is very interesting. It's not as useful as some people are making it out to be, but because it goes on sentinels, it is actually quite a bit better than I think some people are giving it credit for. It's very middling, but for me personally, I replaced coolant leak with this mod. So some people make the mistake of assuming that this like amount of healing is going to just like save you in like endgame scenarios, and it absolutely will not, because medi-ray has an 8-second cooldown between it being able to go off again, and it will not have like a shorter cooldown if it heals less than 12% health. So if you take 1 damage, it'll heal you for 1. And then it will be 8 seconds before you get another heal, even if you just took like another 200 damage to your health, like moments after. Which is unfortunate. Also, it takes 4 seconds to do so. This mod is, however, particularly useful on Inaros, where he has a bunch of health to be restored. It's a much more significant heal, and basically having this on your sentinel just makes it so that you literally could not possibly care less in low-level content, which is really interesting and fun. Definitely because Kella is going to be accessible to kind of low-ish tier players. If you were to farm this at a low level and put this on whatever sentinel you happen to be using, which is usually going to be carrier, for a player that does not have access to, say, life strike yet, this is going to be really useful, and it's nice to have more function-based mods for sentinels. This basically just increases the value of a sentinel that usually doesn't have a lot of like good ways to fill its mod slots other than just being like defensive things, because I had coolant leak in my sentinel just because I could put it there. This makes it more, this is more useful than coolant leak basically, and it's significantly less rare. Definitely probably the third best mod to come out of the Rathuum. Definitely mostly helpful for new players. Then we've got Nightwatch napalm. So before I tested this, I actually had really high hopes for it because I was making it a big AoE of Ogress damage. And I was like, that could be really useful potentially, especially if it takes your procs and like constantly does your procs in an area with damage over time. Unfortunately, it always becomes fire damage, and in my positivity in looking at this mod, I forgot to realize that the Ogress does shit garbage damage. So basically, this is not worth using at all. Unfortunately, the Ogress doesn't do enough damage, and inflicting 30% of its damage over 6 seconds means it's basically no damage at any significantly high level. This mod boils down to just being pretty fun, unfortunately. There's not anything really redeemable about it, unfortunately. I wish it was better, although I wish the Ogress was better just kind of in general, because it's a rocket launcher that does less damage than a grenade launcher, which is kind of ridiculous, but whatever. There are mods that are much worse than that, like Rift Strike. So, this mod is probably the most interesting mod of the set, but it is also the worst mod of the set because it's on the twin ball sack. Those weapons are absolutely terrible garbage that take way too much to build and are just essentially useless. They're like a shorter version of fucking dual heat swords. It's just like on a weapon that can already use a boost from as many mods as it could possibly get, putting an interesting mod that is really cool doesn't add anything to it and makes it kind of even less appealing. I really, really would have liked to see Rift Strike just be a melee mod, because I feel like this is not like an overpowered thing on any melee weapon, and it would be a lot of fun to just be able to just like be like, well, what do I want to do? Well, let's get a fucking kittag or whatever and put Rift Strike on it. That'll be a fun time. But instead, it's kind of pigeonholed into the twin ball sack, which is a shit weapon that is not even very fun to use. It's just some dual swords. So that's pretty unfortunate. I like this mod, but I hate that it's on the fucking twin Vasalk. It's just really unfortunate, because using the mod is fun, its function is fun and feels good. It's just on one of the worst melee weapons in the game. Vulcan Blitz. There we go. Atlantis Vulcan is also here. Vulcan Blitz. So, this mod is pretty good, but for me, I unfortunately think that it is actually better to use a different mod on the kittag due to the range of this mod. So, it's 300 damage plus 60% of the enemy max health. Much like acid shells, it works in pretty much exactly the same way. Problem being is that it's only in a 6-meter radius, which only in a 6-meter radius. The thing about it being within 6 meters and the thing about it being on the kittag is that with the kittag, you tend to throw enemies around a lot and it's very crowd control heavy. So, whenever you're killing them and they're exploding, it's hard to control where they are because you're using a kittag to throw people across the map, which makes this significantly less useful. Also, really hard to test if this mod is bugged in the same way that acid shells is, but if it is, that makes it also very, very way less useful. But I don't know. Vulcan Blitz is an interesting mod. Again, like most of the mods in the Rathuum, honestly. But it's just, I'm not feeling it. Like, I tested it and it was fine, but I wasn't really doing much more than what I would get out of just increasing my speed and making my combo build faster. At insanely high levels, I guess this would be useful, but it's just not great, honestly. As opposed to just adding like an elemental. I wish it was better. But yeah, that is all of the Rathuum mods. There are some definite winners here, and all of them are interesting concepts for like new ways mods can be, but I wish a lot of them were less restrictive. Like for Hunter's Bonesaw, if Hunter's Bonesaw applied to maybe all melee weapons, it might see a little more use, but it applying only to the rip cost makes it a little too niche. It's not really going to see any use case. Nightwatch Napalm is a really cool mod that is on a weapon that just underperforms really badly compared to other weapons, and can kill you. And then, of course, Rift Strike, as I said, is super disappointing that it's not just on all melee weapons. But we also got the great weapons, or the great mods, medi-ray, acid shells, and then Vulcan Blitz is very interesting in that it probably needs more testing to really see, and it really depends, I think, on the build that you're using with your melee weapon a lot. So we might see some more use out of that. And then if a sniper rifle comes around that can really apply with Harkonar scope, then that would be pretty interesting as well. But yeah, that's all of the Rathuum mods, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.